Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollack, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and construction expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living it. Real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades Fire and the rebuilding effort. I'm Joel Pollack, here with Oren Ezra and Ron Goldschmidt, and we have a very, very special guest this evening, Supervisor Lindsey Horvath, who represents Malibu, Pacific Palisades, the area most affected by the Palisades Fire. So before we get into news, I want to just welcome Supervisor Horvath to Three Homeless Guys.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this is really an honor and also a great opportunity to ask you about the rebuilding effort. We're going to start with some news, as usual, and I want to note a couple of things that might be of interest. First of all, breaking just before we started the podcast was the news that California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara has released a list of companies who are providing 75% or more of personal property coverage without having to itemize your belongings. The state minimum is 30%. He asked companies to simply provide 100%. He didn't force them to do it. He asked them to do it. And many companies came to the party. He actually released a list on his website, and some companies didn't. And one of the more prominent ones that didn't is State Farm, which dropped over 1,000 people in the Palisades area. And there are lots of debates about how and why that happened, but it is a huge concern for people in the Palisades. So that is still very much an active issue. But the insurance commissioner did come through with a list, and you can find it on his website. And all you do is search for California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara, and you'll find it. And then the other bit of news is we had the good fortune of having Housing and Urban Development Secretary Scott Turner in the area last night, and that would be Wednesday night into Thursday, March 5th into 6th. And he visited Altadena on the 6th, and he visited Pacific Palisades on the 5th. And his team actually reached out to me saying, hey, can you come to Altadena and cover this event? I don't think they knew I lived in the Palisades. So I said, oh, well, I'm happy to do that. Would you also like to come to the Palisades? So they came and they said, okay, can we meet some neighbors? So we threw a small group of neighbors together, and they got stuck in LA traffic in the rain and everything, but they finally made it. They drove through rain and darkness and everything, and there we were in front of Marquez Knowles, or Marquez Charter Elementary School, rather, and every neighbor was able to talk about the challenges they're having with rebuilding, whether it's the lack of insurance coverage or the fact that insurance doesn't cover the construction cost to rebuild, or the fact that some people still have homestanding, very few in Marquez Knowles, but some people do, and they want to move back as soon as possible, but the area isn't ready yet. There are trucks, there's debris. So everybody had a chance to talk to the HUD secretary, and I was very impressed by how he reacted and listened. And Oren, I think we have a couple of clips here. I think that first one is him addressing the neighbors in the semi-darkness outside Marquez Elementary.
As you can see, the community is devastated. This is our school, Marquez Charter Elementary School. It's a wonderful school, and what survived here is the rainbow mural that was put together by the kids. And another rainbow survived inside the building, essentially the only two things that survived. And for us, it's a very important symbol, just like the rainbow after the biblical flood. It's a rainbow after the disaster.
So that was me before he spoke, but you get the sense of the mood of the moment. It was really very intense. And then, Oren, if we can play the one from the next day at Altadena, he was introduced by one of Supervisor Horvath's colleagues. That's Catherine Barger from District 5, which is Altadena, Pasadena, in the northern part of LA County, and she welcomed him, and he had a lot to say, but we'll just play a little bit of the sound so you can get the mood.
Welcome to California, welcome to Altadena, and so grateful for your commitment and your understanding of what's going on here. So welcome.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor. I'm happy to be here and representing not only just the Trump administration and the president, but also representing HUD and the American people. I've been taking tours, visiting with families, pastors, rabbis, schools that have been closed. I've seen the devastation. But one thing that's been encouraging to me is to see the resolve of the people here in Altadena, in the Palisades, and the areas that have been devastated. And I want to encourage everyone to hold on to that resolve and be unified together and working together. And the government is a convener, a facilitator, but the people working here together with leadership like the supervisor and others, I believe will bring not only great, swift results, but also long-term sustainability. So I'm happy to be here with you all this morning.
So I was impressed by that. I was just impressed by the completely apolitical, nonpartisan nature of the whole thing. And, you know, we have many different political views on this program and different views with our guests, but we just put that aside because we're all about rebuilding as fast and as well as possible. So, Oren and Ron, if you guys want to jump in, and then we'll welcome our guest and begin asking her questions and getting to know her.
Yeah, just on the itemization, fight that a lot of people are having. This seems to be a hot topic right now. One thing I just want to mention to our viewers that we want to be useful. I've spoken to several insurance adjusters, and they all suggest that even if you are getting 100%, if you're on the lucky list or you're getting 100% itemized, you should still itemize over time. And the reason is, once you go over, if you are over the itemization list, like in my case, I would be over the coverage, then you can deduct the excess of losses on your tax returns. So even if it takes you a long time, it takes you whatever, do a room every 2 weeks. Even if it takes you a year, you should do it because it might help you out in tax season comes around, and you can roll those losses over to subsequent years. So it's helpful to do that. I'm certainly doing it, even though I expect to exceed that. Just on that topic, just a helpful tip before we get into it.
So on this on itemization, I started to do my garage, and my garage took me 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
And if 3.5 weeks, I had things over there. Just think about it, ski equipment of my son ever since he's 2 years old, right? Every year you buy a new pair of skis and stuff like this. So if you want to get your the money that for all these things, you need to start looking them up, and a lot of the things are being discontinued, and it's taking a lot of time. You guys know me. I'm usually the one that come to the show upset about whatever happened this week. This week I'm actually kind of more positive and optimistic. I see a lot of lots that have started to get cleared. Not our lots yet. That I'm still, I'm still upset on this one, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure. But I see at least a lot of my friends' lots started to get cleared, and I'm happy for them. And I really hope that we're probably going to talk about it now, but I really hope that we can get to a level of efficiency all of us really want to get, and be able to get permits not in 6 months or a year, but way quicker. And the whole thing of being in Sunset Mesa is a very small group of people, and I think that you'll talk about it a little bit more. That is we're not in Malibu, we're not in LA. We feel that we don't have a mother or father, and we get stuck in the middle in terms of harder regulation, and it's way harder for us to do some of the things that needed to be done.
Well, with that, let me welcome Supervisor Lindsey Horvath of District 3. Welcome, introduce yourself, and tell us about yourself, your career, your path to the LA County Board of Supervisors.
Oh, Wow, that's a lot. Well, I'll stick to I represent the 3rd district in Los Angeles County. We are a county of more than 10 million people. There are 5 supervisors. I have a little more than 2 million people in my district. My district, for purposes of the reference to the fires, I have the entire footprint of the Palisades Fire, the Hearst Fire, the Archer Fire, the Kenneth Fire, the Woodley Fire, the Sepulveda Fire, the Sunset Fire. All of those are in my district. And so the start of this year has been incredibly challenging. Just before the holidays, the Franklin Fire, and before that last year, the Broad Fire, also in Malibu, impacted our residents in our district. So I know that emergency preparedness is a way of life for this district. It was something that people communicated to me as I was coming into office. Coming from local government, I had experience working and thinking about things at that level. You know, how do you work with communities in a time of crisis, whether they be, you know, weather emergencies or, you know, in West Hollywood, we had a lot of large scale events, you know, so how do we prepare from a safety perspective, and how do we make sure that we're managing things correctly? So, I served in West Hollywood, either in appointed or elected capacity, for about 15 years. And so serving twice as mayor and on the city council, I served as a transportation commissioner, a women's advisory board member, a task force member, had a lot of involvement in the city. And originally from the Midwest, I came to California in the early 2000s, and really grateful to, you know, have the opportunity to be of service to a community that has welcomed me so warmly.
Where are you from in the Midwest?
I'm from the east side of Cleveland, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm from the north side of Chicago. So,
Okay.
yeah. You know, just to give people a sense of the scale of the job, I mean, the County Board of Supervisors, as you mentioned, 5 supervisors, 10 million people.
Yes.
Hilda Solis is one of the members of the board. She was in Congress, and then she moved up to be Secretary of Labor under President Obama. And then she moved up to become LA County Board of Supervisors. She kind of became a supervisor. I mean, it is a huge job, and LA County is massive.
Yes.
So, first of all, congratulations. And I'm sure, second of all, my condolences, because this is such a difficult job anyway. And as you mentioned, you've had to deal with so much devastation, and as have we, but you have had to deal with several of these events. So let's just get into very briefly what the county does versus what the city does, because, you know, growing up in the Midwest, we did have city and county. We had the city of Chicago and Cook County, but Cook County did seemingly random things like the forest preserve and the jail. You know, but the city was everything else. So
We have some of that in the county too here.
yeah, okay.
So the county is, Los Angeles County includes the entirety of the city of Los Angeles, plus 87 other cities, plus unincorporated area. So for areas like Sunset Mesa, I'm so sorry you feel like you don't have a mother or father, but we do our best to serve our unincorporated areas. We don't want it to be difficult for you, so I want to talk to you more about that. But for the unincorporated areas, we are their only municipal government. So in addition to the role that the county plays for everyone else, for our unincorporated areas, we are your city. So we, you know, are responsible for your streets and sidewalks and traffic lights and, you know, land use decisions, in addition to the role that the county plays for the whole region as a social safety net. Things like social services, some of the programs that get funded by state and federal government are administered by the county at the local level. We also have the sheriff's department. We have a county fire department. We have the district attorney's office is out of the county, as well as our court system. We have a county justice system. We have more than 30 departments, though, throughout Los Angeles County. More than 120,000 employees work in the county, and so it's a, you know, a big job on a good day. And then when tragedies like this strike, it's even more. And so in my district, you know, because people don't really know what the county is, we often get a lot of questions. My district overlaps with 9 city council districts in the city of Los Angeles, plus 9 independently incorporated cities. So but in the case of the city of Los Angeles areas, we often get a lot of city questions that come to the county because they just don't know the difference. So we work really closely with all of the governments, all of the offices to try and, track that down and make sure, because there's nothing more annoying than reaching out to government and having someone say, like, we don't do that. We're not going to help you with that. So we really try to train our teams to say, we're here to help. Let us track that down for you and make a connection to the best of our ability, so that way you're asking the right question to the right people. But yeah, we're responsible for a lot, and I think the county is a place too where people often come in some of the worst circumstances of their lives. We deal with child protection, and so when there's an issue in a family, or God forbid somebody's in the criminal justice system, whatever that might be, the counties, sometimes people get introduced to the county in really terrible ways, and so that's never a way you want to meet somebody. And we also try to remember that in our office too, that asking for help is hard, but especially when you're in a situation like that, it's extremely hard. And so we try to show up with that in mind when we're helping people.
Well, my first introduction to LA County was with the beaches. So I know that the county runs the beaches. The beaches are fun,
that too.
Although not so fun lately with all the runoff and the pollution showing up. But let's start with the most important job of the county, at least to many residents right now, which is debris removal and landfills. And I'm going to let Oren take over from here because he is the resident expert. And you might have heard in his introductory remarks, he's fighting an uphill battle. But Oren, I'll let you ask the questions and tell your story.
Great. So as soon as the fire happened, I have a lot of friends that are contractors. I contacted a couple of them. We had one of them over here, Gital from Tom of the Line. They have their own company that does debris removals. And I started to ask people, what do you think? Should I do it with the Army Corps? Should I do it privately? I asked few people that did it with the county at the Woolsey Fire, and I heard stories to hear and to hear. And me personally, I decided, hey, you know what? I want to do it on my own. I heard that insurance might get charged a lot of money. I personally think that we were underpaying for the insurance, and I think that if I can even save money for the insurance, it's fine. But I want to make sure that once I'm done with the debris removal, I'm done with this stage. And it wasn't very clear if the Army Corps. I think I listened today to your meeting, and I think it's more clear about the debris removal and what is the Army Corps of Engineers doing and whatnot. So for me and for Ron as well, both of us decided we want to do it privately. The problem is that in Ventura County, when they had the fire a few months ago, a week after, they had a very easy document to follow what you need to do in order to remove your debris. We are, I think, are we 2 months after? We're almost 2 months, right? We're right at tomorrow, we're 2 months after. It's still not so clear what we need to do. If you live in LA County and you want to move the debris on your own, it's not clear. Now, not only it's not clear, every day there is more and more regulation that are being added. So, for instance, if a regular debris removal, if my house burned down in the middle of the neighborhood, so the contractor need C21, C12, OSHA. Now, I don't know who in the county decided that they also need a hazardous material license. Now, the fact that somebody added hazard material license just doubled the cost for us to remove the debris. So if the debris removal should have cost on a house like mine, let's say $30,000 to $40,000, now it's going to be $60,000, $70,000. The number of companies that can do hazardous material are very, very small. So it just doubled for no reason, because stage one was done on my house. There is no hazardous materials. Now, the people that do the debris removal, they know how to put it in bags. They know how to wrap it. They're doing everything. So those are things that if nobody in the county is looking at, it's easily doubling our cost, right? A lot of us doesn't have a debris removal line item in the insurance. So it's going directly from our dwelling costing. The Army Corps of Engineer, it's very hard. Like, we're lucky in Sunset Mesa. I understand that they were like moving really quickly because it's like flat area, so it's easy. But for other people, it's very hard to know when they're going to get to their property. And a lot of people want to go private. And not only this, it's also like supporting our community, our contractors that have been over here. Now for them, there is an opportunity to do a lot of business, and why not? Again, like when they want to give a quote for a project, they're missing so many points. It's so not clear. And I don't know, like I just don't know how the county works. Maybe you can like explain us a little bit and tell us like why is it so complicated? Why we couldn't, like, I'll give you an example from my life, right? I have a manufacturing facility. I flew to a place in New Jersey of a friend of mine. I saw the efficiency they work. I was in awe. I was, wow, unbelievable. I want to switch all my machine. I want to be like, more efficient. And why can it happen like LA County? They saw that Ventura did like amazing job. Take what they did, copy paste, and let us clear our lots, and without spending so much money.
So this, you're not alone. As you said, you've heard some of your neighbors share your perspective, and I think that's why phase 2, you get an option. You get to decide what's best for you, for your property, and working with your neighbors, what's good for your neighborhood. And I've also heard too that some people's insurance, strongly encourages / requires them to use private contractors that they recommend based on the kind of insurance coverage that they provide. So, in cases like that, even though so far of the ROEs that have been returned, about 99% of them have opted into Army Corps, we have heard cases of people who said, my insurance said, you got to work with this contractor, and so that's what we're doing. Okay. From that standpoint, I understand. So you just want to have an understanding of how it works, where things need to go. Some of that is, recently developed through the debris haul routes, and that happens also, in partnership with the Army Corps, depending on which landfills they go to. It's, while the role that the county plays is trying to bring all these entities together to come up with a coordinated plan. But what is actually, each level of government is independently empowered. So, for example, on the landfill component, there are 17 landfills that are licensed by the state of California to take the phase 2 debris removal, And so out of the very nature of what license they carry, that is what determined their ability to accept that fire debris. So, for example, the Calabasas landfill, there's been a lot of contention around that. That landfill is allowed to accept that debris based on the license that they get from the state. And in fact, it took debris from the Woolsey Fire. So while there was a conversation around whether debris from an additional 2,000 households in houses in the Palisades area would be eligible to go to Calabasas, the decision to take the debris there, to extend the hours, to increase the tonnage per day, all of that was determined by entities that were not the county, and yet the county is part of the operation of a landfill. So all of that to say, every aspect of this process is complicated, which makes it confusing. And for people who just want to get straight answers, everything feels like, are you really telling me the truth? Because nothing is like one-to-one that simple. So right now, what we have developed are, in partnership with the Army Corps, are the hauling routes. We've identified the potential landfills that that debris can go. And if you go privately, you have to follow all of those same standards. So if, for example, we have some cases where people have opted to use private contractors, but they haven't gone, but phase 1 has been deferred. So I'm clear that that's not the case on your property, but because it does exist on some properties, I'm sure that's where that came in. I didn't personally authorize that. I don't know if that was a public works call or an Army Corps call. I will find that out. I appreciate you raising it to track down if that makes sense for every property and whether that needs to be necessary. Because you're right. If we're narrowing the scope of people who can provide this service to you, what we're actually trying to do is move efficiently, because all of this debris out there for a long period of time is not helpful. And so I want to figure that out, because that I know why having that expertise is helpful, but having it be required, especially if your property is clear of phase 1 debris, doesn't make a lot of sense. Some questions, we've been revising the ROE forms based on feedback that we've been getting from people. So that has been updated because there have been different ownership structures for different properties. And the county's role with the ROEs is verifying all of the information that's on it. The actual content of the ROE, all the questions and the things that need to be verified, were directed by the Army Corps. So that wasn't necessarily all information that the county needed, but the Army Corps needs it per FEMA in order to proceed. So that's how that process gets informed. And then, making sure that the private process moves in the same way that the Army Corps' process does is what informs the process more generally. I don't know if the Army Corps informed Ventura County's process, but because FEMA is involved and because of the role that FEMA plays and how we get reimbursed for the magnitude of this disaster, they have a strong voice in how things happen. It is all a coordinated effort, and to the extent that the county has a role to play, I always appreciate feedback, so that way we can drill down and make it easier for people, because that's kind of the point.
Can I ask a question?
To finish on this one,
yeah, go
I think it's great, and if we can find out if it's like coming from FEMA, something like this, we will contact FEMA. We will go to FEMA and we'll ask them, hey, why do we need like a hazard's license? It's doubling our cost.
Yeah.
Things like this will be great to get an answer and understand where it's coming from and how can we solve it. Every week that we standing on like more debris goes in the air.
Yes.
More debris goes in the ocean, and we want our lots clear, not just for us, but like for the people that live around us. They still have standing houses like Joel, so Joel can go back to his house, for our oceans, for our nature. So
And I
think we need.
Yeah, I met with representatives of labor today who were sharing some concerns about, Army Corps has, for those who use that process, they have one main contractor that they're contracted with. And then that contractor contracts with a lot of subs. So you talked about some of the local companies. Some of those companies are being contracted by the main contractor that is hired by the Army Corps. So there are local entities that are being hired. But what I learned is that, they're hiring people ostensibly based on their training, but in reality and in practice, it's often based on past relationship. And so there are workers that are coming from Northern California based on their experience working in those fires, when we also want to make sure that people who are trained to do that work in Los Angeles are getting jobs too. So
Wow.
Some of that complication, coming up in the contracting process, I appreciate when people share what their experience is, so we can fix things, because sometimes it lands with you and you're like, why is the county doing this to me, when in reality, if I had knowledge of it, I could do something about it for you. So
the question I had was, and this comes from people who've written to me about some of the struggles they've had with debris removal.
Yeah.
Is there an effort to crowd out the private contractors? Because there are all kinds of stories out there about the Army Corps' contractors or subcontractors blocking off a street or not letting somebody move their truck or whatever it is. And you mentioned, because there's not a one-to-one question and answer situation, sometimes people do feel that they're not getting the whole story. And often I think because of the chaos, sometimes people feel maybe there's some kind of conspiracy to do it one way or another. But I have to ask you, is there an effort to, shall we say, strongly encourage people to use the Army Corps and not to do it on their own?
Is there? I think we've all said we strongly encourage you to use the Army Corps. I don't think we've physically erected structures or tried to create barriers in the landscape for it.
But why is it better to use the Army Corps than a private contractor?
Well, I think from you know best. Like, you live in neighborhoods with all of these narrow streets. There's only so many people who can be up there at a time. And if, I said from the beginning, everybody has to decide what's best for them, their family, and their property. And you also have to work as a community, because if 20 homes have 20 different contractors, that's going to create even more of a nightmare when you're thinking about hauling routes, getting that debris out, and move, traffic flow and everything else. So I think from that standpoint, from a logistics standpoint, it's easier to work with fewer lead entities, and that, especially when that lead entity is committed to hiring local and employing a lot of our local businesses who want to provide this service. And of course, that's what they do. So they're going to make money on it. But if that in practice is not landing in the way that it's intended, then it leads to conspiracy theories. It leads to all kinds of frustration. And so, in practice, we have to make sure that it matches what our intentions are. And admittedly, that doesn't always happen.
Ron, can I ask one follow-up before you jump in? We had a guest on one of our first shows who was wondering why, when you opt in and use the Army Corps to clear the debris, there's some set amount. He mentioned $170,000 or something in that area that is given over to the Army Corps once they collect from your insurance, if you have debris insurance. And he said he couldn't figure out why it was such a high number, and that it should cost less, in theory, to clear your lot. And that's one of the reasons he was deciding to do it on his own, because he had debris removal coverage in his insurance policy, and he figured he could do it for $40,000 instead of $170,000. I tried asking a FEMA official about the policy, and I just got more confused. She did explain to me that LA County will actually come to the homeowner to collect the insurance payout for debris removal on behalf of the Army Corps. Maybe you could explain how that works, because I was very confused even after I knew a little bit more about the process.
Yeah, I remember from the first debris town hall, I was asked that question from the audience, like, how much, ballpark does it cost? I had no idea. And Congressman Sherman jumped in and said that number, $172,000. I have no idea where he got it from. So it's not the first time I've heard that number, but I don't know that it's, a standard line item. I haven't heard it described in that way. What I do know is that, you can't get when FEMA does reimbursement, you can't get sort of a double benefit. And so what will happen, and the advice that we've been giving to people is, go ahead and use your insurance benefits as you would. You don't have to save it waiting for the Army Corps to come to you with a bill later on. In fact, you will never get a bill from the Army Corps. It will come from the county. The county will come and ask if you have anything left in your insurance benefit to cover the process for debris removal explicitly in your insurance policy. If you have anything left and you use the Army Corps policy, you use the Army Corps service, they're required by law to make sure that you're not sort of double dipping in terms of the benefit that you get from FEMA and from your insurance. But if you don't have anything left because you didn't have a debris removal coverage in your insurance, or you used all your insurance benefit, you're not going to get a bill from the county. You're not going to get a bill from the Army Corps. And that process of reconciling doesn't happen for some time. I'm told the way it works is the county works with the state, and because the state makes the request of the federal government for what the reimbursement is. So we go over back and forth over the process of the next couple of years of reconciling all of that. So if there's no insurance benefit left, you don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah, so my understanding on this is that 172 is what the people from the Woolsey Fire got, that they used the Army Corps. And again, I think that the main reason people like myself and other people want to use private is because this what can be taken from our insurance. Now the process of building will take us, I don't know, hopefully a year, maybe 2, maybe 3. Maybe we don't know how long, so we rather have clarity how much we're paying right now. And I think that until today, nobody was very clear to somebody that doesn't have a debris removal line on his insurance. Nobody came out and said, hey, if you don't have, we're going to take up to, it can be 170, 10,000, 5,000, 70,000. Nobody came out and said what is this exact number. And I think this is what creating a lot of confusion, and this is what making us feel uncomfortable with the whole process, because this is just the first stage, and the first stage shouldn't be that complicated. I'm sure you've seen how they remove the debris. It's not like that complicated, and if we're getting stuck on this stage for so long, and I don't know if you've listened to a couple of the previous episodes, but I think we're in episode 8 or 9. Every episode we spend like at least 30 minutes on debris removal, where we should actually start talking on like how to rebuild safe, how to like get the process quicker, how to do so many other things. So your help will be amazing if we can get it cleared.
Yeah, actually, the Sunset Mesa community has inspired us. We launched a Blue Ribbon Commission on a resilient and fire safe recovery, because I know there's been a lot of focus on coming back quickly. If you build what was there, you can go, sort of get rubber stamped and move forward. And for some people, that may be your ostensibly your desired option. But I think when we're thinking about insurability going forward, I think that's also how people are thinking about what does affordable actually mean if I'm thinking about rebuild. And incorporating some home hardening and fire hardening practices into your rebuild and into your community might help with your insurability, which helps with your long-term affordability. So we've convened experts, including insurance, including finance, including urban design, all kinds of expertise to talk about exactly what that looks like. Because insurance was in the room, they were convened and had a retreat last week. And one of the things that came up from our insurance expert is that in some cases, some insurance won't cover certain parts of your rebuild if it's not required as part of your standard policy. So while we think we're helping people by slashing all this red tape, quote unquote, bureaucracy, for example, if it's not required that you have solar panels on your home, I'm making this up, then they won't cover you replacing them if it's no longer required. And so making sure that we have the right requirements in policy while people are thinking about rebuild and submitting plans from an insurability perspective, it is complex. And so we're making sure that we have that kind of expertise at the table. I know there have been other bodies that are convened that want to get into that conversation with us. And we want that to benefit, the entire region, not just Palisades, not just Eaton, but all of Los Angeles County. And I was really inspired because Sunset Mesa said, we're close to 400 homes. We're leveraging scale. We're hiring designers who are thinking about our whole community, not just one property by one property. And I think that's going to be a helpful way of thinking, given the scale that we need to rebuild at and how quickly we all want to rebuild and get people back into their homes. But we also want to think about the 21st century realities we're facing too. So you're absolutely right.
Just one final question on debris before we move on. There's a lot to talk about. I drive on PCH every day, miles and miles and miles. On the ocean side, I don't see a lot of progress in debris removal just yet. I had, first of all, a suggestion, and secondly, a question. Because I think the concept of momentum is extremely important. Yes. I mean, we've talked about it in past episodes. I think we just need to see that lots are getting cleared today. We've started seeing it more on the land side the last couple of days. Yes. But that concept is really, really important, I think, for the community as well, to see that we're moving, the ball is moving forward. On the ocean side, has anybody brought up the idea of removing vast stretches of miles there with there's just debris upon debris from the ocean side, i.e. getting a shipping hauler and building a barge where we can remove things from that side, because I think from the PCH side it would be extremely difficult to do these one or two lots at a time, even if it is the Army Corps, whoever. Has anybody thought about that?
So somebody actually did pitch us the idea of doing a pier, creating a temporary pier that, Army Corps has constructed such things in other parts of the country at a time of disaster. And, it was originally pitched to me as a way to not have to truck debris to landfills, but instead put it on a barge and ship it somewhere else. And the question of where the somewhere else is comes in there, is that actually the most efficient way to get it to where it's ultimately going to go? But that concept has come up before. I think the issue that we're running into, and I totally appreciate not only from a confidence standpoint, but just like a well-being standpoint, you want to see progress being made, that you're not just sort of sitting in the same mess all day, every day. One of the things that we're running into on the coastal side is, in part, some people have not yet responded, turned in their ROEs, or just responded at all, indicated in any way that they are engaged. And some of it is, complex ownership. So they're deciding what they're going to be doing with their properties. It's something I spoke about with staff from the governor's office this week, and we actually toured with the Senate Pro Tem and our local Senator Ben Allen the week before, to show them sort of what we're dealing with, because a lot of those properties were created property by property, so there's not a contiguous seawall there. So we have to, even when we do get the permission to get on site, we have to make sure that in the debris removal process, we don't actually cause more harm, because if the property isn't cleared properly, then we could be causing not only a problem for that property, but potentially for the ocean and potentially for the PCH. So we have Caltrans involved in that conversation. And we also, Department of Public Works is, from the county side, is working to sort of, and to bring our state partners to the table to say, how do we think about this as a collective and make sure that we are, not doing anything to further destabilize what's going on over there, but also to move quickly so we don't have debris going into the ocean. So we have a very complex set of challenges there. So that's it's not because we don't want to move quickly, but in some cases, if we move too much, we could cause more harm.
Is that being considered, the oceanside debris removal, or it's just a no-go from an environmental perspective? Because, I mean, the way I see it now, like, if the faster it is, the debris is being removed, the less harm to the ocean right now, because it's seeping into the ocean at the moment with nothing happening. So is that being considered?
I've heard this idea, but there's no concrete plan to move forward on it at this point in time. I don't know that anybody's evaluated that to say that that's the more efficient or effective way to do it, but I appreciate you raising it.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the county as regards emergency services. Mm-hmm. Oren mentioned the Woolsey Fire. There was an after-action report after that fire.
Yeah.
And it's actually a really great document, although I think it's written in consultant speak, so it's a little bit hard to understand.
Yeah.
There's one point in there that says, encourage the major fire departments in the area to evaluate creating a sub-regional 3-county multiple age. I mean, I start to put myself to sleep just reading it, but basically what they're saying is we need better coordination between the emergency services. And certainly in the city of Los Angeles, which obviously you don't control, it was a mess. We didn't have any police, and we love our police and our firefighters, but we didn't have any police directing traffic. The evacuation was a disaster. It's a miracle more people weren't killed because of the massive traffic jam. And then, of course, there's been the drama that's playing out in public now between the mayor and the former fire chief over whether there were enough firefighters pre-deployed. Mm-hmm. They had 10 engines, according to the LA Times, they could have put in place beforehand. The one area that did seem a bright spot was the county, where the county fire department did have some pre-deployment. I read about that. And mm-hmm. one of the public officials who impressed me was the LA County Fire Chief, Chief Marone, who was the only person who I had heard from who actually apologized. I was at a town hall meeting and he said, I'm sorry, we didn't do enough. And he didn't have to say more. It was just an acknowledgement that, okay, I understand people are really upset about the lack of water pressure in the hydrants and the lack of firefighters who were able to help. Even if you had an engine on your block, they often drove by. So what lessons were learned from the Woolsey Fire? And can you tell us a little bit about how the county prepared for the fire and what might be done differently in the future, at least on a county level?
Yeah. I think some of the after action from Woolsey is still playing out. But I know from a personal perspective, it meant it was the top of mind conversation when people were deciding who they wanted to be in my seat. And so people shared with me their experience of how long it had taken them to rebuild, if they had rebuilt at all, what their experience was like, in the moment of the fire. During Woolsey, I heard horror stories that, you would get one message from the sheriff's department, a different message from the fire department, a different message from the supervisor's office, and that caused confusion. People didn't know their evacuation routes, all kinds of challenges that if you, do training, if you help people get engaged and have that as part of your emergency preparedness mindset and awareness that this is something that could play out for you, you can't solve all of the problems. And of course, not everybody pays attention when it's not a time of crisis to know all of those things. But if you at least get it out there in the community enough, you start to have people in the community who will help you in those times. And so now you've seen, we also have created community brigades where there are people who are literally trained by our fire department, who are in Topanga, who are in Malibu, who know they're not going to leave. They want to be of help and of service, and they are actually able to play some important roles to stand in places where if they weren't there, a firefighter would have to do that job and not go fight the fires and do the things that they're specifically trained to do. And so there's really more of a community and collective effort from that perspective. So some of the things that we've done to remedy that, our sheriff's captain, Jen C2, and the local captain, in addition to Chief Maroney, our local fire chief, Drew Smith, those two are my dynamic duo. They lived through Woolsey, they saw it all, and since then they have been they documented everything they went through, and they've been training the communities ever since. Here's what to prepare for, here's the things we recommend to harden your home, here are the websites and apps that you should sign up for to get different kinds of alerts and to track weather and all kinds of stuff. And we do those emergency preparedness trainings in partnership with them throughout the year to make sure that we are getting as much information to people as we possibly can when they're not in a time of crisis. Another thing that the county did is really beefed up our Office of Emergency Management. So there was a centralized hub inside the county infrastructure that when you go into that emergency mode and you open up the EOC, which we on the county side, in this case, we actually opened our EOC before the fire ever broke out, which gave us sort of a leg up into being able to kick into from a start mutual aid and then eventually unified command with city and state.
So was it able to bring the city emergency services in? Because one of the big stories in our neighborhood was that people would call the police for help with the evacuation, and the police dispatch didn't even know there was a fire. There seemed to be no communication between the police and the fire department. And the training you're talking about in Topanga sounds amazing. I wish we had that. Topanga, I guess, is unincorporated, so
yes,
county deals with it.
Yeah,
we didn't really have that in the city.
At Mesa, I'm kind of their mayor too.
Okay, so I mean, it's great. We just needed that, I think, in the city of Los Angeles, parts of Palisades, and a lot of neighbors did that kind of thing on a volunteer basis. We put out fires in each other's yards, and we helped each other, and some people had access to amazing insurance policies where 3 guys showed up with a truck and some water and sprayed down other people's hoses or yards or whatever. But I mean, it's just frustrating that there wasn't more integration, because I think, I mean, is there any effort to work that out with the city and make sure that all of these different emergency services are coming together someplace?
So this city activated their own EOC because of all of the services that they have.
Well, why do they have? So that's weird though. Like, how do you have 2 different ones?
I know. Well, the county is the first response for unincorporated areas, and then for areas that contract for our service. And then we also are mutual aid for the entire county. So we play those 3 roles simultaneously. So for Topanga, we are their fire department. For Malibu, we're their fire department because they contract with us. Same thing with Calabasas, Westlake Village, Hidden Hills, Agora Hills. But then for the entire region, we also are mutual aid. So we didn't just stage fire trucks thinking about the unincorporated areas area or for our contract cities, we actually had to stage county trucks throughout Los Angeles County in advance of that red flag event because we didn't know where it might break out. We expected it might be somewhere in the Santa Monica Mountains, but then we also have to work with other staging in mind. So knowing that the city has its own plan for staging in advance of an emergency, we stage with that in mind, that the city of Los Angeles is going to stage in its area, and Santa Monica, city of Beverly Hills has their own fire. They would stage their, and with their own city in mind, and so forth. So that's where sort of the local jurisdiction stuff can get a little bit tricky, but it doesn't mean they're not talking to each other. It's just who's the lead agency, so you're not tripping over each other. And in the city of Los Angeles, it's your city agencies that are the lead. What I think needs to happen on a going forward basis, and we're going to do our after action, but one thing I think is, for the resources that exist, that are water reservoirs, if something's offline, we should all know about that. And I understand that in this case, the Santa Ynez Reservoir was, is a city facility. I think on a going forward basis, it's helpful for us to know that resource isn't available, for us to be able to use at a time like this. I guess I learned also that at some point that reservoir actually ended up having a cover over it because the county used it at a time for the Santa Monica Mountains, and the city didn't want them to be able to use it anymore. So that's why it has a cover now. And so I just think we have to get to exactly what you're describing, a mindset of cooperation and collaboration, for the benefit of what's happening on the ground.
I know we have
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I want to move on to another subject while we have time, but I do have a question regarding some of the resources being available to the residents that are going to be displaced for the next few years. And what I'm hearing from a lot of the my neighbors and such is that look, most of the disaster area was underinsured. Okay, like I think either I think there's some lucky folks that were adequately covered, but a lot of the neighborhood were not adequately insured, and now so you're now looking at a few years where they're going to be out of the neighborhood renting. Maybe they're staying somewhere in the vicinity, but on a national, and I'm not sure this touches the county like exclusively, but I'd love to get your input on like what are some of the things that are that are folks thinking about in terms of like helping people stay put, because at the end of the day, whether people know it or not, like the construction costs have skyrocketed. It's going to be extremely hard to rebuild, the same place that you had before unless you have, coverage over your insurance. I feel like some of the national programs in terms of HUD and like any assistance on a national level are kind of out of touch with the zip code and where we live in. They're more tailored to other parts of the U.S. They're great programs, but they just don't fit, the mold of the Palisades or Malibu. What are you hearing in terms of like any other help that's coming the way of folks that are going to be displaced for a couple of years?
Yeah. So, I'm interested to see what FEMA brings up, because I will say that they've indicated, they've stood up long-term housing solutions for people in other disasters throughout the country. I know I have friends who are in Lahaina who lost their homes, and hearing that experience of how FEMA came in and helped to create an interim temporary housing solution, so I don't know all of the details yet of how exactly that will work, but I know that that's something they want to bring to bear. I know that Steadfast LA, which I believe is Rick Caruso's group, has identified a partnership with the name of a company that I'm blanking on at the moment.
Samara.
Yes. Yeah. So that stands up, housing that can be either interim or long-term, depending on, what you're looking to construct on the site of your property after it's cleared. And so, that's another, there's technology and developers out there who want to find some solutions, because, for some people, who are at later stages of life, they're thinking about, is it actually worth it for me to rebuild and live somewhere temporarily in hopes that I ever get back to a home. So we're keeping all of those different experiences in mind, families, older adults, all of the different needs that we need to meet, and bringing those to to FEMA for advice. We're also working, the county has stood up relief funds because we know that a lot of funds were out there, and we started to hear from people, well, where are they going and how do we access those dollars? It's nice that everybody's raising money, but I don't know how to access it and I need money now. So the county has stood up 3 funds, one for residents, one for small businesses, and one for workers. And that all of those applications are out and available to people right now. As we get more funding, we'll be able to hopefully increase the allocations that we're providing to people. Of course, that isn't going to cover the cost of rebuilding a home. It's really more to offset sort of in this shorter term some of the costs that you're incurring that FEMA or your insurance might not cover. So we're trying to stand up all different types of relief support, but longer term, my commitment is that we're not going anywhere, and we're going to make sure that, we're with people every step of the way, and finding housing is going to be a component of that.
Today in Altadena, Supervisor Barger mentioned something called the land bank. They're going to try to create a land bank to help that community. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit more if you know about that? I actually asked some of the legislators at the state level if they had heard about it, and they referred me back to the county. What kind of institution is it? Is it going to be a lending institution, and where is the funding for it going to come from?
Yeah, so we're exploring that concept. A land bank is different than a land trust, but the idea is that it would be created largely to try and kind of protect communities from outside some of these big corporate folks coming in, buying up property from people who might not want to rebuild, but still want to offer the opportunity to somebody else to come in and build something like what was there, and recreate the community to the extent possible, to what it was. And so we haven't created a specific land bank, fire footprint by fire footprint. But what we're looking at is how the county can be an entity that works with the region to have a place where there's a sort of I don't want to say first right of refusal, it's not that formal, but that there's a place where your property can go if you don't want it to just go to an outside entity that really isn't going to think about what the sense of community is going forward. And so the state is, some of our state legislators are exploring this idea too. And so I know that's an ongoing conversation, whether there may be a state funding source to help support that on the ground. But we're at very early stages to be able to speak about it in more detail than that is a little premature.
So I have to ask about this because it just came out. Our friend Jamie Page, who was on the show a couple weeks ago, has an article at the West Side Current about an audit of the homeless services, Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. And, we're 3 homeless guys, although we're homeless because of the fire, not because of economic circumstances or whatever the other reasons might be. But the amount of money being spent on homeless services is pretty large. It's in the billions of dollars. And I think people will have different opinions about whether we should be spending or how much we should be spending, but it is frustrating that some of it can't be accounted for. And then we look around at our community and we all kind of are homeless or scattered. I mean, we have a roof over our heads, thank God, but we're trying to rebuild, and many of us have needs that are not being met. And it's frustrating to feel like the money's being wasted. So I wonder if you can address that, the sense or perception that money that is spent isn't being spent properly.
Yeah, I sat on the LAHSA Commission for 2 years and did it on purpose to see firsthand what was going on there. I definitely have experienced a lot of frustration there because I saw firsthand, that the LAHSA Commission really isn't the driving force for how that organization operates. LASA is formally a JPA between the city and the county. So it was created out of a court settlement to address street homelessness specifically, that the city wasn't getting the support from the county that it needed at that time, or that was the contention. And so this was created to sort of more formalize how those two entities are supposed to work together exclusively for street homelessness. And then because it existed, it sort of got all of these other responsibilities. When Measure H passed, a lot of funding went there to sort of be doled out to a variety of service providers. But I don't think, from my perspective, there was ever conscious, intentional thought put into how do you build out LASA so that the accountability structures that should be in place for an agency now that has close to $1 billion in their budget, how do you account for that properly? And so the county did its own audit, which I initiated with Supervisor Barger. This most recent audit was directed by Judge Carter because they are still working out the terms of the alliance lawsuit with the city of Los Angeles. And he directed the city to pay for an audit to be conducted. And I think the results just show that the system's broken, which we already knew. And I think that it's long overdue, especially now that Measure A has passed, for us to stand up a structure that makes sense. With living with this crisis this long, we should all know how to be able to get people housed quickly. And so I've proposed that the county, instead of just allowing Measure A funds to flow in and doing business as usual, I've proposed that we scale back LASA, that the funding that's coming into the county through that county measure actually stay with the county, that the county consolidate the work that it's doing right now. 14 different departments touch the issue of homelessness. So consolidate that work to one department that has a clear lead and has clear accountability and contracting authority as it needs. And that's where the money goes, and that's how we hold it accountable. We have the auditor controller make sure that we have set up the systems that need to be in place to manage the amount of money that's coming in. And we issue contracts and hire people based on outcomes, not on who's been in the queue and just sort of churning things that don't work. And so that's a proposal that I'm bringing forward based on a report back that I requested about standing up our own department. Because we can't just keep spending more resources. We have to dismantle the things that don't work.
I have a question. I love the voice of efficiency.
Yes.
And I think we all need to see this efficiency coming into play in our immediate life. I'm now stuck. I cannot remove the debris. I'm sure I will get stuck again when I want to get permits. And after that, when I need to put a structure on. So can you explain us in the county? Let's just talk about the county right now. Who is in charge of taking the stick and making sure, hey guys, I'm coming, I'm here right now. I'm making sure that all of these things that used to take 6 months, Oren had to wait 2 months for his debris removal. I want Oren to be able to remove his debris tomorrow. Who is the person that is in charge of taking the stick, making sure that this thing is happening?
I will be your partner in that. Ultimately, the departments report to us as the Board of Supervisors. And for you in the unincorporated area, not only, like I said before, not only am I your supervisor, I'm essentially your mayor. So our regional planning department is your planning department. And so much like the mayor works with the city's planning department, I work with the county's regional planning department to help you in your rebuilding process. I work with the Department of Public Works to make sure that your debris removal process is happening and that you get the answers that you need. So I want to help you. My team is, we have people dedicated on our team for each of the things that you've described, and I want to make sure we're helping you every step of the way. And not just to get through this process, but just as you say, to also codify these efficiencies. It shouldn't just be we cut through red tape at a time of emergency, but then we let it go back to normal afterwards. What's the point? Like, if we've learned that we can do things more efficiently, let's just do it that way going forward. And we've seen the troubles that people have faced in building. There are some challenges that are put in place for good reason. When you're in a very high fire severity zone, there need to be additional considerations to make sure you're building in appropriate ways, if you should be building at all. And we want to make sure that those considerations are taken into account. But bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake is not helpful, and it's been very costly in terms of not having the kinds of housing resources we need to solve our homelessness crisis, and now to solve this kind of rebuild process. So I want to work with you. I'm excited about your expertise. I'm grateful for your partnership if you'll work with us.
Definitely. So then I have like two things that I think that we need to take care of immediately. First of all, on the debris removal, let's remove this hazards license. Nobody need hazards license to remove debris.
I'm gonna figure out why that's a new requirement for you.
Awesome, great, thank you so much. And the second thing, I think there was an amazing idea from somebody, I forgot who, that said, hey, whoever built his house in the last 10 years, why don't we just print out their permit, send it out to them? Hey, go ahead, build your house. So I think these two things, if we see these two things happening, because I don't see any reason why these two things shouldn't happen in a matter of over a weekend.
Yeah,
these two things.
Yeah, we as a county actually already said if you built your house, I want to say it's in the last 5 years, and just resubmit your plans, that's fine. We'll go with the plans that you've had. We're, essentially in effect rubber stamping them. And, I asked the question at the time, are there any regulations that have come up that we should be considering? Because of course, for fire safety purposes and a fire safe rebuild, I want to make sure we're not cutting corners that create us problems in the future. And they said there wasn't anything that from that perspective that they had to worry about. And they'll continue to work with property owners. But yeah, the county's already issued that.
Awesome. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've been incredibly generous with your time this evening, and I know people are going to enjoy this podcast.
I hope so.
But before we let you go, I want to ask you one final question, and really just looking toward the future. Mm-hmm. I know you have to deal with so many details and so many questions like ours and other people's questions, but when you think about the future of the area affected by the Palisades Fire, what do you think it looks like, and how do you feel about it? Do you feel like we can get there? How soon will we get there? How do you feel looking forward?
I think we're going to get there. And I don't just say that because I am admittedly an optimist, but because I know the people who live in these communities who are absolutely committed to coming back to the community that they have loved and they've, really nurtured and helped to grow for so many, and in some cases, a few generations. And so seeing the passion that people have for that, when I saw the Sunset Mesa community come together and say, use us as your example. We want to show how you can do this on a regional scale and do it quickly by working together. So use us. Tell us what we need to do so we can move faster. That's inspiring to me. Not many communities come together in that way saying that. So we have a real unique opportunity. And if we as leaders don't take advantage of that, then shame on us. I think that we have a responsibility to people who have helped to build our region, who have created extraordinary businesses, who, by the virtue of all of the things they've done in our communities, deserve to know that we're going to have their back in this time of crisis. So that's my focus. That's my goal. I want to make sure that people know that they have that kind of support in me and in my team. And so I am hopefully, I am optimistic, cautiously, of course, because it takes all levels working together and making sure that we continue to all provide this consistent support and focus. And I've heard from people, but are you going to be there when the cameras go away and we stop having these town halls and all of that? And, I will say, I will make that commitment. I want to be there for people. I want to see you coming back into your home. I want to see your kids going to schools. I'm so happy to see Pali High has been cleared and now they're onto Marquez already. And, we want to see that happen quickly because it's not just your home you have to rebuild. We need to rebuild the community that helps you rebuild your life. So I am hopeful. And I am committed to helping to push and bring the sense of urgency that I know you all have to get it done.
Supervisor Lindsey Horvath, thank you so much for joining us on Three Homeless Guys. And if people want to follow the podcast, it's at threehomelessguys.com. We're on all the platforms, including YouTube, and you can reach us at pod@threehomelessguys.com. So for myself, Joel Pollack, Ron Goldschmidt, and Oren Ezra, thank you, Supervisor Lindsey Horvath, and thank you all for listening. We'll be here soon enough, rebuilding after the Palisades Fire.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Three Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out threehomelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@threehomelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.